Garbage taking over all about. What a shame, what a shame. Man be getting very slack, you know. Dumping garbage in the road, bobo. Look, we cannot keep on going on so.
Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. Once described as the Garden City, Georgetown is now called the Garbage City. But garbage is an issue beyond Georgetown. It affects every town, village, and neighborhood in the country. How did we get here, and can we reverse the decline? To help us discuss those questions, if not necessarily provide solutions this evening, are Dr. Mayu Trotz, environmental engineer and professor at the University of South Florida, and Mr. Dave Martins, social commentator through decades of music. Dr. Trotz, Mr. Martins, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
How wide does this problem go? Am I right in saying it's a problem that affects the 83,000 square miles of Georgetown? Anyone can start.
Of Guyana, yeah. I think that's true. I mean, it's more concentrated in the city because of what a city is, and probably because of the political questions there. But it's all over the country. Obviously, it is. I mean, you see this in Port Kaituma. If you go there, see it in the Pomeroon and stuff on the river. It's everywhere.
I would go even further and say it's a global problem. It's not just a Guyanese problem. We're dealing with a lot of more materials. A lot more people are consuming stuff that gets thrown away, and we have a garbage problem in the world.
Dave, you and I belong to a slightly older generation. Is that something that has evolved recently? How did it suddenly dawn on us?
Well, that's a question that I think some intensive research might have to answer. I'm not too sure that I have the answer. I know that the Guyana I grew up in wasn't like that, but then the Guyana I grew up in was different from this one in many ways, not just in that way. So it's a very tangled question as to how we got there. I can only say that coming back here every year virtually since 1969, sometimes twice a year, I've seen the gradual change and been puzzled by it and thinking, well, this will go away, or it's just a temporary thing, and it's actually gotten worse. The styrofoam aspect of it, the things Maya referred to, the changes in the globe that have landed here, plastic being one of them, which we didn't have when I was growing up. We didn't have styrofoam, we had paper bag. So that's part of it as well. But it's a very complicated issue. It has to do with how our culture has changed, because we seem to accept it. We leave Guyana, we go outside, and in 2 weeks we stop throwing garbage. In this country, we keep doing it, and we go away and come back and resume doing it. So it's a very tangled question as to why we got there, how we got there. The unfortunate reality is that we're there. So we have to start looking at some of these things, talking to people who are on the ground, talking to people who are involved in the work of it, the administration of it, financing of it is another thing that comes into play. You'll hear that from the government. Why these things cost money? You know? So it's a very complicated issue. And how we got there is, in a sense, important to know how to fix it, but why we're there.
Dr. Trotz?
I would agree too. I would say if we look at the present, we're here right now. And for me, I think it's when you go exercising around the place and there's garbage around you, the question comes, do I have to run in this atmosphere? And I don't think we do. And I think people are aware of that. And what happened in this one past week in terms of getting a diverse group of people together to address issues of our sustainability, garbage came out as something that people were concerned about, and that maybe one area in which we could see how we work together in addressing issues of sustainability in Guyana, that take advantage of the fact that we have populations on the coast, we have populations inland, we have Guyanese populations overseas who have very strong ties. We're very interconnected to each other. So if you want, we could talk about some of what happened this week under a theme of water sustainability.
We'll get there.
Climate change, sustainability, and us. So.
You said just now that it's a global problem. Now, as we end with this global village, everything is ranked. You're on a Transparency Corruption Index, and both of you live in lots of other, I think Dave, you lived in Canada, you lived in the Caribbean, you've lived mainly in the United States. If it's such a global problem, where does Guyana stand in your perception in this problem?
I think we lower down the ladder. I mean, just again, we are at the point of looking at these things and talking about them. But just from your eyesight, just to drive around, as Maya said, just to walk the seawall, just to drive around Georgetown. I passed this morning coming to your office. I got on the road right here, right in the middle of Georgetown. You're choked with smelling bad. I mean, you don't have to do much research. This isn't rocket science to know that we are in bad shape when it comes to this problem. And I think your reference to us living in other places, one of the things, and we could talk about this a bit, one of the things I see in other places that we don't have here, well, there's two things. One is this matter of top-down example that we have in other countries. In other countries, you can't do this. You can't leave your car parked, your abandoned car parked on the parapet for 6 years, and nobody comes to you and say, move it. So it's a top-down position, one. And two, the other thing we talked about recently as well in our discussion groups is this matter of enforcement. The people will change, but they have to be led into it. They have to be, well, hopefully persuaded into it. If not persuaded into it, then mandated into it. You cannot continue to kill yourself, basically. That's what we're doing, So I think those two things have to come in somehow.
Dr. Trotz?
I would agree with Dave. And I've taught in Singapore at Nanyang Technological University, so I spent a semester teaching while I was doing a postdoc at Stanford University. And compared to Singapore, we are definitely not as clean as they are in terms of what you see on the streets and so on. Compared to pictures I've seen from Haiti, it makes us look very clean. So it's a little relative, but the fact is we should not have plastics or garbage in our streets, in our drains. It leads to various other issues related to our health, related to our vulnerability in terms of we're aware of the issue with flooding, which comes a lot from our clogged drains. So these connections really need to be made so that we start living a little more smartly, I would say.
The question of the top-down example and the enforcement goes towards partly the solutions. We'll get to there shortly, but you've mentioned, in fact, one of the problems, and I think you said, Dave, when we were growing up, we didn't have some of the kind of waste material that we now have. What are some of the major problems, major causes, whether it's plastic, styrofoam, what are they?
Well, I think Maya can probably answer it better than I can, but I think we have to do, that's this informal group we put together, that's one of the things we have to do. We have to start tackling that question, trying to get a little hard information on it, and she can speak to that area because she's the environmental person.
I think globally, if you want to look at packaging material, there's a large movement, Google, the plastic ocean, Google, Midway Island, where folks are trying to really raise awareness on where your plastic goes and that there are places where plastic collects in the ocean and the impact that's having on our marine environment. Midway Island, Chris Jordan is a photographer who's been trying to raise awareness through his images. And so he uses his images that you can zoom into, and he sort of lists like how much cell phones we're throwing away per second, how many plastic bags. And it starts as this really gorgeous looking painting. And as you zoom in, you actually see the materials that he's talking about, and it's the materials we're throwing away. And then his project in Midway is where he actually went there to this island, close to where the plastics have been collecting. And he's been taking pictures of the albatross the birds that are dead there. And he's not even adding plastic or moving them around. He's just taking pictures of the carcass, and it's just their insides were filled with plastics. And the question you must ask is, how disconnected are we as a people? When I was here at Christmas, I was driving along, I forgot the name of the street, but there was this huge dump of plastic, and there was this cow just sort of grazing somewhere in there. And the question, when you see images of the albatross with plastics in their belly, you wonder, are we doing that to the animals that we have here also? Is this coming back to affect us in our food, in the food that we eat?
It's happening with turtles here, what you talked about.
Are we not making these connections? And what do we need? We need the musicians, we need the graphic artists, we need the photographers who can also help to just bring this vision to people so that we're more aware, because maybe not everyone doesn't see these things, and we really need everyone to start contributing.
Dave, you interjected just now about the turtles. Tell us about that.
Well, what is happening with the turtles is that the plastics that we dump in the sea, the turtles swallow it, and it remains inflated within them, and they can't dive. They float to the surface and die because they can't live with the surface of the sea. And it's happening. My wife's work with our previous work with Shell Beach. They're seeing that a lot. They see these. A couple of them came ashore here. One came ashore here, not ashore at Georgetown about 6 months ago. Floated up at the Stelling, and they called her to go down. They look at it and checked it. They checked it out. They brought it ashore. Took it to the zoo and had the vet there look at it. And that was what they determined, that the turtle they would put it back in the sea, but it would die because it could not dive. It was no longer able to dive because of the plastic balloon inside it, similar to the albatross thing. So we're seeing it right here.
And that, I don't know if Annette, your wife, who does a fantastic job in preservation of the turtles, would that have been from just debris?
Yes,
in the
thing
sea
that she's talking about that goes in the sea does not sink and does not denigrate. It remains alive as an object, and so the turtles swallow it. But you see, the other thing is that while this is important, I think what is impacting us more here in Guyana, because a lot of that stuff, like that happens in the sea, we don't even really know about it. You know, as you're illustrating, the stuff that we don't even have to go there. Just walk around your country and look. I mean, you don't even have to look. It comes in your face. It's there in front of you, you know. And I think that is the part of it that is more, I don't want to say it's not certainly more important, but it's more dynamic in the sense that stuff comes at you. You drive to town every day from Vogel, where I live, to come to town. Every day you get the message. You don't have to look over into the sea or go and read a report somewhere or see a picture of an albatross. You're seeing it right here. It's right in your face. So the people who are in this country, whether it's people like you and me, or people higher up the chain, or leaders of government, they're driving by it too. We're all driving by it and seeing it. You know, it is not an invisible problem. And I think that is the point of this whole exercise that we're undertaking. We know what the thing is. We're seeing it. Why can't we fix it?
Well, you say we know what it is, but some of it is probably more extreme. We only see some of the things. The one about the turtle,
well, yeah, exactly.
I've never heard, you know, and that really is fundamental to our continuation as a species on this planet, isn't it? And if we're talking the food chain and what makes up.
But it's all part of the same thing. What we don't see and what we see is all part of this one condition that Maya talked about, which is we basically throw away stuff now, and somebody else has to figure out what to do with it. That's basically what's happening. We just throw it whether here or outside. The problem with us here is that we have other conditions in the mix that are contributing to the problem here that are hampering its being fixed. But it is a situation that is everywhere, and it's a situation that is so obvious. I mean, we don't have to be talking about people and telling them about garbage in Guyana. They know.
I would say another example is if you walk by from on on not Mandela Avenue, on Charles Street, and you cross over by where the Lama Canal is. So there's a sign there that GWI put up, and it says, "Please, no dumping." You were asking what does our trash look like, you know? And there's a large site there where people are dumping illegally. There's been some burning also. You see tires, you see glass bottles, you see plastic that's melted. You see all sorts of different types of garbage there. And if you just look a little further and go over to where the water is, there's a sheen of like oil on the top there. And then you make a connection, well, that's going to our water treatment plant. When it rains and the leachate from that burnt area goes into that water body, that's coming back in our taps probably. Sure, it's being treated, but we need to make those connections also, you know? So, and we can look at that trash, and I think some of the university students, as their student projects recently, have looked at what does the trash look like on their campus, the makeup of it. I've seen reports for Georgetown looking at the types of trash we normally send to the older landfill. And one thing that struck me was a large percentage of it is stuff that does not necessarily need to go to a landfill. There are other things that we could do with it to recover things like nutrients from it, to recover it so that it could grow plants and so on. You know, we could make compost material out of it because about 50% of it is biodegradable, easily biodegradable.
You know, when I was a student, we used to hear about planned obsolescence, types of things being made, and okay, it's expected to go within X months, but they didn't seem to use that much resources into them. Now, it's probably, if you were to buy a fan, it's probably cheaper to replace it when it goes bad
It is.
than to repair it. And you probably can't find somebody to repair it anyway. Is it part of our materialist society now? We get something, we just dump it. We have enough money either to go and get one more on a replacement on higher purchase, or just get another one.
Yeah, but that's true everywhere. That's not just true of here. That's true of every country. The difference in our country is that you're right. You have what do you do with this material? The difference here is that other countries have found ways to answer that question. We haven't seemed to have found it. We do, as the guy in America does, gets the same box with the same, I just bought a television set. Styrofoam, plastic, cardboard, I mean, this
3
much
layers
stuff,
of,
right?
yes.
He's finding a way to, or has found a way, or has been made to find a way, put it that way, to handle that. In our situation, what do I do with that stuff? I mean, it obviously is going, we don't have the answer to that here. And we don't have the answer not just to that stuff, but our regular household garbage. We're not even separating that and taking the toxic stuff out and separating the biodegradable stuff. We're not doing those things. So, you know, I agree. I see your point that it is a condition, but is it a condition that is everywhere else and is being handled, and we're not handling it here?
I would say this, in the States, sure, the garbage is not, we don't see it, you know, in the canals and on the streets and stuff. We do see it, but not as much as we may see it here. We do have solutions in terms of there's centralized pickup and they take it to a landfill, but from the environmental engineering field, we're struggling with that right now.
That's in the United States.
Yes, that those may not be running out of space. You know, you have to deal with the leachate. It takes a lot of energy to maintain and run these landfills. They contain a lot of materials that we're now thinking we need to mine in the future because it's a lot of resources that we want, some of the metals that go in there. So that they're challenged too. And I think the opportunity, I hate to use the word opportunity.
Is it a challenge of technology or a challenge of resources, financial resources?
It's a challenge of technology, of how the cities are designed, of these large centralized systems. It's a challenge along many different areas. And, you know, it's a challenge with manufacturing, that many manufacturers, it is true, they're designing things right now that you cannot open something and fix it. They're irons that you cannot open and fix. The idea is that you either send it back or you throw it away and buy another one. So from folks who are in mechanical and manufacturing, dealing with the mechanical engineering and dealing with the manufacturing sector, a lot of what companies are looking at right now under this theme of sustainability is how do they design products so that they can recover their materials from it, because they've noticed that is the most energy efficient, water efficient way in which they need to build and move products in the future. We are becoming resource limited. And so that's it is a challenge in the States where I am. I think for here in Guyana, many households struggle with what to do with their garbage, or we would not see these little burnt spots in front of people's houses. You know, people are trying to figure out what to do because there is a garbage buildup.
You suggest, subject to what Maya is saying, you're suggesting that other countries have found a way to deal with this problem.
Mm-hmm.
So in this global configuration, that solution is also available to us, subject to the resource and technological constraints.
Yes, but I think we are lower down the chain. The chain that Maya describes, that level that we're way below that. They have at least solved the problem that is confronting us here. They've solved the pickup and collection. And sure, they have the problem now when you put it in one area, what happens? But at least they've gone that far. We haven't gone that far. We don't have the stuff. Well, to some degree, we have it now with the new landfill. But especially when you talk about across Guyana, we haven't gone there yet. We still throw the stuff away or burn it or put it in a plastic bag and drop it on somebody else's property or whatever it is we do. We have not solved, to me, the fundamental problem of collection and control of the waste. We have not gone there yet. So that's the first step.
Is that a proposition you agree with?
I sure do. And I would add, we've not solved the reduction part either, in terms of just reducing the amount of waste we produce. You know, we used to go to the market with our baskets to buy vegetables and food on a Saturday morning. Now we go to the supermarkets and we buy the same vegetables that are packed in a little piece of styrofoam with a plastic on top. And we collect it in a plastic bag. And there are ways you reduce that. You can, in retrospect, make the basket thing in again. You know, these are challenges that I think, and these are some of the great innovative solutions that I think people are going to come up with.
And fairly basic ones.
And very
not
basic
costly.
ones, yes.
You mentioned the challenges you're facing, and I guess to some extent we face, but Dave doesn't quite go that far. Is it partly because we should not have that kind of problem because of the size of our population? If you were to take a US city,
Exactly.
a district,
Exactly.
look how many people.
Yeah. And look how much land we have here. Look how much area we have here to remove stuff far away from where people live and away in the wilderness areas. Basically, if that's what you want to do. But that fundamental problem of, you see, but again, we have to be careful in our discussions there not to be sounding like we're pointing this, aiming this problem at any particular area, because it is very complicated. I mean, the people who are, I'm sure that the people in the administration here are making some efforts to fix it. But you have all sorts of problems, and this is a complicated issue. There's cultural attitudes involved. There's financial for the homeowner, financial considerations involved. If somebody has to pay $300 to pick up their garbage, some people don't have it. So that is involved. Attitudes developed over the years has been involved. Physical constraints. In some places, trucks can't navigate into those areas, take a pickup. There's all sorts of things that are involved in this issue. So it's not a simple matter of, well, get a truck to pick up the stuff. The question of with dumpsters, the big garbage receptacles, basically, has been brought up over and over. But again, my experience with that was that when that requires time for people to get used to that thing. Because when I was living in Canada, when they started putting them out, people ignored them. They put the garbage, they decided to dump it and ran away. So it's an issue that requires a lot of various approaches, various motivations, I talked before about the pushes. The pushes have to come from a lot of places. The institutions, the religious community leaders, politicians, musicians, artists, people on television like yourself. You know, it requires a lot of push from a lot of areas, and to get to this thing, to get your arms around it. It's not an easy solution. If it was an easy solution,
We will fix it.
exactly. People like Jocelyn and the Government Group and Oliver, incidentally with that Hope Lodge project, those things would have taken hold, would have worked. You know, it's complicated. Here in Georgetown is really the fundamental problem there. Of course, apart from people dumping the stuff, that's a problem. Is that the whole sewerage system in Georgetown is basically choked and plugged up in a lot of cases and not functioning. So the water that used to flow in the canals, well, what we call not canals, what we call gutters or drains, following rainfall in Georgetown does not anymore. To a large degree, in some places it doesn't. I remember as a kid putting little boats in the trench when rainfall, in the gutter, when rainfall, doing boat races. You remember that thing we used to do? That don't happen anymore. The water not flowing. So that's part of the problem. In town, if you talk to people who understand what is under there, the sewage system under there apparently is, for people who know, like Port Carter, it's very complicated and huge, but it's plugged up. In the areas, it's plugged up. The cokers, some of the cokers that drain Georgetown, I think 6 or 7 of them, many of them are silted up. The outfall is not taking place. So that's another problem. So that impacts on getting rid of what we used to throw before, banana skin or whatever we used to throw before, or little pieces of paper or cardboard, is not going out how it used to go out. The complication is there. On the other point though, I would like to say that the part of it that distresses me the most as a Guyanese is to see, I don't know that we seem to have made that connection about this thing is not good for me. Because right where I am living, in Oleander Gardens, there's a trench behind the house, and there are properties on the other side of that trench that regularly come out of their yard. They have a little gate in the back and put their garbage on the parapet right behind the house they're living in. Right there. Every week you see them come out, they close the gate and they go back. And almost like if the gate, whatever the problem is, the gate blocking it. You know, that says to me that somehow those people haven't made the connection.
And look at the people you're talking about in those communities.
Well, I don't know.
They're supposed to be the people. No, they're supposed to be the people who would have read, who would have understood, who would have traveled, who would have seen.
Well, some do. Some do. Going the other way on the area where we live, going north, you don't see that. But this is right behind us, and you drive around that area, drive around the Liliendal area, Turkey, and you look and drive by and watch the trenches that just as you go by. Many of them are the old problems, styrofoam floating, and you know, where is that coming from? Somebody who doesn't have the connection in some way has deposited and say, well, this is somebody else's thing, I ain't worried about it, you know. If we don't seem to have, and like I say, we were never that way. You know, go there to Cripple Coast, for example, you see people who seem to take more pride in the yards and sweep in the middle, you see people sweeping. You don't see that in Georgetown. So how has this shift come about? Those are the kinds of things that we need to be trying to get a handle around.
I think the thing that amazes me is that knowing, you know, you do have folks who, when you go in front of their houses, the grass is cut, the drains are clean,
Right.
but the neighbor or two neighbors down, it's completely clogged.
Right.
And these are folks who know that when it rains, if somewhere down the road, down the line is clogged, then it doesn't matter if in
What
front
you
of there
do
is
then?
clean. So I think
Yeah.
it suggests that maybe we're not working with our neighbors, and maybe we are not working with everyone in our street, you know, and maybe we need to follow the water, see where it flows, and figure out how to work from neighbor to neighbor. We could go around any place in Georgetown and you'll see that one person will take care of their little parapet and in front of there and right next door, they're obviously not translating or working with their actual neighbor on solving some of these issues.
I think that would certainly be a big factor in helping the problem. But I think there are people that are not going to buy into that. We need the enforcement side to this so that the ones who are not caught by the personal motivation or the neighbor, which is a good approach to take, there are going to be people who are not caught by that. And how you catch them, how you fix them, or how you handle them, I should put it, is by enforcement. We have to have the enforcement. That's how the programs in the countries he's talking about have succeeded. Singapore, Canada, the US, they have succeeded by a combination of that, public awareness, appeal to common sense, neighborhood community involvement, but behind it comes the enforcement. If you don't do it, we can move the truck and charge you for moving the truck. You know?
On Plain Talk this evening, we're discussing the situation of the garbage with Dr. Mario Trotz and Mr. Dave Martins. We'll now take an ad break.
I let it fall, my heart, and as it fell, you rose to claim it. It was dark, and I was over, until you kissed my lips and you saved me. My hands, they were strong.
Welcome back to Plain Talk with Dr. Mario Trotz and Mr. Dave Martins. Just before we took the break, you were making the point about neighbors, and if one neighbor keeps the place pristinely clean and organized, and the other neighbor just blocks their area, there's no progress. We have lots of public properties, and I'm not saying that only public properties suffer from this, but and public spaces. So the private persons, the individuals, can do as much as they want, but if the public spaces are not of the same standard, we're back to square one, aren't we?
Well, to some degree we are, but I don't know that, I think that cuts both ways. There are some public spaces, in my opinion, that set the example very well. There's some that fall down, you know. I'm writing a piece on Guyana, column in the paper this Sunday that touches on Campai and Guyana, different approach. But the example of Campai and Guyana, which is a manicured, properly tended, there's no trees falling down, there's no signs that are leaning, there is no litter about. The place is like a little oasis in the middle of everywhere else in that vicinity. You look, you see all the aggravations, as I put them, right? So there are examples of places, and businesses as well. There are some business places that are spotless. You know, you go into, there's a place at the junction of going towards Houston there, a water organ, I think it's the Water Authority. No, not the Water Authority, that's not right. It's as you turn going to Houston, that area at the left there, immaculate. Spuds in Georgetown, immaculate. Place near where I live, Andrew Art. I mean, it's like they paint it every week, you know. Yes. So there are examples around. We just seem to, they don't catch enough. Most people seem to think it's okay to left it up, as we say again, left it by, you know. So I don't know that is the assault on the public or the point about the public places. I don't know. We don't seem to have taken on this idea of, let me give an example. When I was here, before I came to live here, I was talking to Terry Older from GTND. And we were talking about problems in society, and he's talking about attitudes in people and litter and all this kind of thing. And Terry said to me, which sort of strikes at what Maya said earlier. He said, you can't solve that problem. He said, but you know what you can solve? You can solve the little piece around you. Whether it is your physical environment or your work environment or your family, there are 5 or 6 people or 300 square feet of Guyana that you can make an influence on. It's a fixed up. And if you think about it, that's a nucleus of an idea. If you can get that to spread, the problem with that, as I said before, is that some people can chups, right? And for them, you need the other method. You need the cough, right? But that I find works. If you can, and let me tell you, interestingly enough, even in your own circle, you're going to find some people who are going to chups and say, do away with the garbage, separate, me able it up. You will find that attitude, you know. So, but it is at least a beginning. Think about it, if everybody in this country adopted that attitude, I can fix my 45 square feet and my 10 people, garbage will disappear.
And I think that leads into something that has sort of brought the three of us together this week, where I mean, we just sent an email and a Facebook message out using social media saying that we were going to meet and talk about sustainability, climate change, and you. It coincided with the Caribbean Tourism Organization's Sustainable Tourism Conference hosted by Guyana this week. And at the conference, someone had raised the issue that they'd gone walking on the seawall in the morning, and we were here for a Sustainable Tourism Conference, and that they saw a lot of garbage.
And this took place within the conference?
This was at the conference where someone who's based in Barbados raised the issue. And so that became sort of a jumping off point, because many people who were at Monday's meeting, which we held at Cara Lodge, were at the tourism conference, and they said, well, this group, you know, under this theme of sustainability, climate, and you, maybe one of the issues that we should look at is the garbage issue. We want to look at a lot of issues, but maybe the one that's most pressing right now is the garbage issue. And so the group, and it involved lots of various people. We had students from the University of Guyana. We had faculty from there. We had the head of Conservation International. We had folks from Irokrama. We had folks from the diaspora. We had the head of the science advisor for the Caribbean Climate Change Center based in Belize. We had Dave Martins and Anit Arjun from the Mangrove Restoration Project. And the whole group decided that we wanted to look at, you know, dealing with this through Parliament, because the issue had come up on this plastic bottles, and Dio Prasad had asked, Deodat Prasad had said, what do I go and tell residents in the community where I live, where the drain is clogged with plastic? What do I tell them to do? What should they do with it? Should they burn it or should they bury it? And so this question came up on the plastic bottles, and that we charge, there's a levy on plastic bottles that are imported into Guyana. And so the question was, if there's a levy, what is that money being used for to help deal with the plastic bottles? So there was a group that wanted to look at that. And then there was another group that said, we want to work in our 45, you know, in our small area, in our nucleus, and deal with issues there. And we want to share information. And we want to start, you know, becoming this community from the Rupununi to the coast, where we are working on this together in our own way. And that's how we left. And then we decided that, okay, let's meet again on Thursday to move on these things, because the folks doing the petition to Parliament, they needed some information, which we'd gotten by them. And so on Thursday when we met, we had some of the same people, folks from Guyana Citizens Initiative. We had folks, many more students from the university came. Many of the Faculty of Engineering students came. And we actually broke into small groups to work on certain issues. We had the petition group who were, you know, brainstorming what their next steps were. We had a group that said, we want to work at the school level to sort of show things that we could do. So, and then we had a group that said, we want to work on a community level. And that was, we're going to work with the Mangrove Restoration Project, the school project. We're going to work with a teacher who was present from North Georgetown. We then had a group that said, we want to work with public space, and decided that maybe they'll try and see how to do something at the seawall. It could be the seawall, it could be National Park. I just want to say that Dave talked about Camp Ayangana being this oasis. Drive around the perimeter of Camp Ayangana. Right now, I will say that this morning, there is clogging in their drains, overgrown with grass. Drive a little further on Carafesta Avenue, and you get to the National Park, which is another public space. At one point, I thought it looked like there was a little covered cell for a landfill, because there's garbage everywhere there. And this is our national park, which links into the Kaichor National Park, which was being touted as one of the tourism destinations for folks who are visiting this week. You know, so in terms of our public spaces, I think it's very important that we set an example there and ensure that those are safe, clean spaces for people.
Maya, let me disclose this, that I must, out of complete honesty and sincerity, I am a director of the National Parks Commission, and I'll go down there and check that place this morning. So is Anit Arjun, in fact. We'll get back to some of the solutions you proposed. You raised the question about the tourism, the impact of this, our garbage situation, the image. What effect is it having on us? We talked about some of the more personal things. What impact is it having on the country?
Well, from a tourism standpoint, I lived in the tourism destination for 25 years, and my former wife was director of tourism for 5 or 6 years there. And I can tell you it's disastrous. It's disastrous because we as Caribbean
Disastrous
people,
here, you mean what
is
damage areas?
wherever you look, wherever you have tourism, that thing is a disaster. Because while the resident community may have become accustomed to it, and we drive by it and ignore it, remember that the visitor almost invariably is coming from a country where he doesn't see that. So that is a huge shock to him, one. And two, he is not going to simply, it's not a benign situation. He's not going to look at it and say, as we say, well, boy, that's how it goes. They are going to get in your face. They would, when I was in Cayman, they would write letters to the paper about seeing a plastic cup. And Cayman is very clean compared to us. A plastic cup on the beach, they would rail about it. They would write letters to the director of tourism, which didn't appear in the press, which I saw because of my wife. And the worst thing is that there was a consultant who came down there while I was there and did a report on not allied to that, but, well, sort of, in the sense that one of the things he treated was the factor of information that a visitor leaves a country with. And there's an interesting paragraph in which he said, a visitor to your country with a good experience will go away and tell 5 people. A visitor to your country with a bad experience will go away and tell 45 people. So bad news spreads. People love bad news. So let me tell you, people who come here, and we don't see it in our press, we don't see it directly, but it is unquestionably true that people who come here and see garbage in the street and see people walking around holding up iguanas, as we do, those things that are acceptable to us are shock waves to those people. So they go away, and they're, instead of being promoters for your country, they're preventing people from coming here. They're telling people, you go to Guyana, you better walk with long boots or some such action. I'm making light of it, but it is true. Tourism in Guyana, I understand the reasons behind the suggestions that we inculcate it into our economy, and it is valuable in that sense, and we have great potential in that sense for the kind of ecotourism especially. But you cannot do it under these circumstances. People will come here and say the country is beautiful, but, and it's a huge but.
We have a low carbon development strategy, and we're trying to preserve nature, preserve the environment. Is there an inconsistency here? Without going too deeply into the LCDS, is there an inconsistency?
When you think of what low carbon development is, and actually there's a link to tourism, because many folks now are there's a change in people that's coming where they're tourists who want to do good. They want to travel and go to places where they're doing good for something, right? So you travel and you pay for a carbon offset for the CO2 emissions that you would have involved in your travel. The whole idea of sustainability is building. People are looking for green hotels because they know the materials in there give off less toxic odors from the volatile organic compounds in there. They know that it's built so that it's cooler or something like that, right? So when you talk about low carbon development, it's not just about preserving what's in the Rupununi or in the interior of Guyana. It's about how we're also living and building on the coast. It's about reducing our energy use. It's about reducing our water use. It's about using our natural space and our natural resources sensibly. And you could go through any neighborhood here and just look at some of the houses. And there are these gorgeous older buildings that had no air conditioning, lots of light, lots of natural light, lots of windows for natural airflow. And these are the hot topics in sustainability right now. These are the hot topics in architecture and so on. How to build these houses that use natural resources and do not require a lot of energy for cooling or heating, or cooling in Guyana's case. And right next to that house, you will find a new building where they've put concrete in the entire yard. They've raised it a couple feet, of course, put concrete in the entire yard. So all of that runoff is going into the little trench outside that was made for a yard where there was some sort of seepage or natural infiltration that's taken away by this concrete. And then these houses are built with few windows, large ACs, and those are, you start to look at your carbon footprint, and it includes the energy that these things use. It includes the energy that they require for all the concrete that they use. So when we talk about low carbon development, we need to look at everything holistically, from the coast to the interior. And we need to look at it and frame it in terms of our water and use, our energy use, our materials use, and also how it links in with the local communities, our neighbors, and so on. And I think that's, the LCDS gives us that opportunity. And it's, I hope that as Guyanese, we see that. And we could really lead the way in what the term sustainability means.
Comments, Dave?
Well, I think that's an area that starts to get a little down the road for me. I think that's very valuable. My concern is more tomorrow morning, and in that area, I must admit I'm not optimistic by what I've seen in the last while I've been living here. In the last 10 years I've been coming here. I want to go back to the point of tourism earlier and illustrate it this way. There are two areas in two countries. This is one, and there's one in Barbados. We have a seawall here. In Barbados, they don't have a seawall, but on the south coast of the island, they've built a boardwalk, which is a similar creature for mankind to parade. It's about a mile long. And if you just take a video camera, don't say anything, just take a video camera and shoot along the Georgetown seawall on Sunday night for the stretch of it, which is about a mile as well. And then take a video camera and go to Barbados and run that video camera against that 1 mile of their boardwalk. And you present those two things on television, and you will see immediately the difference. The positive experience of the Barbados boardwalk, there's no odors, there's garbage bins all over the place. There's tourists walking that boardwalk, running that boardwalk. There's a police presence, occasional police presence, just monitoring it. There are areas where you can sit on benches. There's areas where you can actually...
And you can talk, the noise pollution.
No, well, music is another thing. But I'm speaking simply of the sensory experience of being on it. Compare that to somebody who walks the seawall in Georgetown. The smells, the absolute lack of any kind of garbage, well, it's not complete lack, but there's a very poor garbage collection system. The fact that it is unfriendly in a lot of cases, and from a lot of experience, not only from people, it's environmentally unfriendly. The one in Barbados is completely different. Think of a visitor who walks that Barbados thing and then walks the Guyana thing. Think about those two people, and it tells you what our tourism, in just that one area, and widen it across the country, that tourism potential, how damaging it is here as compared to the one there.
I wanted to just follow up, and you said, what do we do tomorrow? And just again to share the approach that we were taking this week with the
before we get there, I'll try to get it just now. The government had in fact started this by legislation, the environmental tax, where it imposed a $10 per individual unit container on plastic and non-returnable containers. How helpful has that been, and can we use that to move it forward into a solution?
Well, I think the lobby group, the group that was going to write this petition and find out this information, they're working on that. And I think some of the issues raised were, when you talk to certain businesses, they say, and you say, would you take your plastic back and so on? They say, well, we paid $10 to bring it in, so somebody should be taking care of it. I think we found out that some businesses are now bringing in the raw materials and manufacturing the bottles here. So they are avoiding the tax that the other business who bring it in are paying. I think we want to know, where did that tax or levy go, and how was it spent? Are there ways in which it could be spent to collect these bottles, to do something with them? some of the solutions, I think, coming out of the community group that's going to work at the Mangrove Restoration Project, because they had a professor of chemistry, Dawn Fox, who was a part of there, and she's really looking at solutions. She got her PhD at our institution, the University of South Florida, and was part of our Engineers for Sustainable World chapter. The UG students are forming a chapter here too, which is really encouraging. But she, at her house, she's looking at these things, you know, she's collecting her glass bottles, she is composting or giving her compostable foods to her neighbor who has pigs so they can eat it. And I think her approach with that group, they suggested that they wanted to look at what are some residential and community level solutions to dealing with this. So from a research standpoint, they are going to work hopefully with the Mangrove Restoration Project to begin with. Could we build low cost, smaller scale, maybe landfills or incinerators? We have a field guide for development workers that one of my colleagues has produced based on the work of our Peace Corps water and sanitation volunteers. So hopefully they start moving on that. And I think that's the approach that we'd like to take under this umbrella group that we've formed, this website called mindingguyana.org. And the university students will be an integral part of that. We've had other members of the group saying that they work with youth organizations and they are going to be involved. And so hopefully I think we can start addressing some of these issues with tangible things that we do on the ground, so that, yeah, it's not just here sitting, but we could take the video camera and we could show this is something that has come out of it. Does it work? It works. Does it not work? It did not work, but that's okay because we're trying as Guyanese to come up with solutions.
Yeah, let me give you an indication of how the situation has gone with that tax. It probably was about $150 million in the first year. It has remained at $10 per container for the 17 years. Now, forgetting inflation and all of that. We now collect 8 times as much as we did when the tax was introduced. It means our garbage from that taxable source has increased 8-fold purely from imports, let alone what we do locally.
These are just the bottles?
Yes, the non-returnable containers. So it is 8-10 times worse because we're not talking about what has come through illegally and contraband. You wanted to talk about how we deal with some of the solutions. And you mentioned the institutional framework. But my issue, and I think we call it the DO question. I come from a village, Alexander Village. And villages are very common, regardless of where they are in Guyana. They have the same kinds of problems, the same type of people, etc. You have George, the Hegbosh, you've got these bigger places. How do communities get rid of their garbage?
Well, I think that's one of the things that in this sort of discussion group that we've put together, that's one of the things that one of the units is going to look at. It is not easy. I mean, we've talked about some of the things here. We've talked about people influencing one another, and we talked about people taking responsibility for their own space. But it clearly requires more than that, because it is not, people have come at this thing and people have tried, and it requires, I don't think we know the answer to that. We don't know, for example, we can make suggestions, but we don't know for sure what is the most effective way to solve that problem. As I said before, there's some people who are not going to be, who are frankly disinterested. They don't care. I don't know how you fix them. And as I said, we have to have this
enforcement and penalties.
We have that combination. Ultimately, this thing has to have, in my opinion, has to have whatever solutions you come up with, it has to have government support or government enthusiasm, if not necessarily support, but at least enthusiasm or acquiescence to it. Because otherwise, they're going to, the example is going to be not enough. The admonition is not going to be enough. The song you write about it and put on TV is not going to be enough.
The talk is not going to be enough.
The talk is not going to be enough. one of the things I think would help is if we did, we mentioned this before, I think Maya referred to it as well, video. We have, the technologies we have nowadays are deleterious in a way, but some of them are very effective, and video is one. You can put on, NCN can do it cheaply, 15-second spots. We could, it's one of the things we could organize propel from our group. I can show you 15-second spots, pictures of, just pictures of garbage, or a picture of somebody dumping, or a picture of a glog. Don't say anything, just run it on the TV, and with a line underneath, we have to fix this. And just keep doing it, over and over and over.
Let me make this public commitment, Dave. You get that video for me, and it will be shown on Plain Talk at no cost.
Great.
Yes. What do you tell these villagers? My people in Alexander Village, in Houston, in Agricola.
Well, from spending Thursday with the university students and the Faculty of Technology, and with Amir, who's sitting outside, who's going to start up the Engineers for a Sustainable World chapter here, I would possibly go with some of the university students who are looking for research projects, who are looking for their final year projects. And also we work on, say, if are there people from the village who are concerned about these issues, who's working there, right? So I may go in with you at your household and say, well, what's in the trash? Let's see what's in the trash. And we sit and we go through what's in the trash. And I'll see a bottle. I say, Chris, you really had to buy this? Or could you have taken your own cup to the place and get it? So, you know, we start working on, we could reduce, so we could change our own habits so we don't generate so much waste. And then we could look at the waste stream that could be easily separated out. And I was like, you know, Chris, you have a garden in the back. We could build a little, what kind of composting system could we build here so that you have some fertilizer, that your plants are going to look better? And then we go even more. And we, you know, so we go through the trash and then we come up with solutions. Well, where do you put, what are you going to do with this thing? Nobody's coming to pick it up. Do you have space to, or a spade to dig a hole to put it in? No. Okay. Could we build something to burn it? Right? We could burn it in the open. Well, if you burn it in the open and your kid is running around, maybe you don't want your kid to inhale that smoke. So could we build something so that it burns a little, maybe cleaner or safer? And I think that's the approach we need to take. We need to look that there are alternatives. There are solutions. And as a group and as a people, we can come up with those solutions. Those solutions could become the next big thing to hit the market, not just the Guyanese market. But I could come and buy one and take it home because it's so much more efficient.
We have just about 45 seconds more. Is, from your experience, and I think you're probably the fitter person to answer the question, but I want to bring David, is that technology around in India, Indonesia, in Ghana, Nigeria?
It's being developed. A lot of it is innovative, a lot of it is new. But other countries are dealing with these problems and finding these kinds of technological solutions as well. The other thing I would like to say, though, on the basis of what Maya just described there, which is how we should be going, is that the flag I would put up is this is not an overnight solution. This is a long-term process. This thing took a long time to get to where it is. It's going to take a long time to fix. That one-on-one interaction with people, like she described, is dynamic, it's working, but think of the thousands of times it has to be done and has to be replicated, and they have to come back and remind you 6 months down the road, right? So it's not going to happen overnight, but that's the thing I would leave with people. This is a problem that to be fixed is going to take time. It's not going to happen like you snap your fingers.
I would agree, but I would also add we have a lot of youth involved, and they're very au fait with social media. And so it's going to take a long time, but maybe not that long.
Dr. Maya Trotz, Mr. Dave Martins, thank you very much for appearing on Plain Talk this evening and for discussing so frankly and knowledgeably this very burning issue of trash and garbage in Guyana. Operators and viewers, thank you, good night, see you next week.